My daughter turned her back on me at her wedding, worth more than $250,000, by posting my face with "no entry" written under it. The father who once gave her $45,000 was cast aside like a stranger. But the night was not over. When the music stopped and the vendors demanded payment, the truth came crashing down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in my Brooklyn apartment, the late afternoon light pouring in through the curtains in streaks of gold and dust. The place felt too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you hear every creak in the floor, every tick of the clock. My hand rested on the arm of the old leather chair, the one Margaret and I had bought more than 30 years ago when we first moved here. My eyes wandered, and they landed on the family photographs arranged neatly on the wall. Smiling faces, birthday cakes, graduation gowns. Ava's picture from her college graduation was in the center, framed with care. I remembered the day vividly. The pride in my chest as I watched her walk across that stage, the tears in Margaret's eyes as she squeezed my hand. That moment had cost me $60,000 in tuition fees, paid out slowly, semester after semester, but worth every penny because I believed I was investing in her future. Next to that memory sat another. The shiny blue sedan I bought her when she turned 22. $25,000. The kind of car that made her feel grown-up, independent, and safe on the busy streets of San Francisco. She had hugged me that day, saying, "Dad, you're the best. I'll never forget this." I had believed her. I had trusted that promise. But promises fade, and gratitude can vanish like mist in the morning. Now, in this same living room, I sat with the crushing weight of betrayal. My daughter, my only child, had stood by while her fiancé, Harold, maneuvered me out of her life. Worse, she had played a part in it. She let him use her to put his hands on my savings, my retirement, my very home. The house I worked decades to keep, the nest egg of $450,000 saved penny by penny, the Brooklyn brownstone worth over $700,000. All of it suddenly at risk. I had thought of this apartment as more than just bricks and wood. It was my fortress, my history, my legacy to her, and now it had become the very prize her new husband was circling like a vulture. I leaned back, closing my eyes. The shock of it had settled into something deeper, something heavier. The kind of pain that isn't sharp anymore but dull and constant, like a stone pressed into your chest. At first, I had felt disbelief. How could my daughter, the same girl whose scraped knees I used to bandage, whose bedtime stories I used to read, stand against me? But disbelief gave way to anger, and anger slowly turned into clarity. They wanted everything, not just her hand in marriage, not just the blessing of a father. No, Harold wanted control of the assets. My daughter, blinded by love or manipulation, was letting him have it. I whispered into the silence, my voice barely holding steady. "Margaret, if you were here, you'd tell me not to be weak. You'd remind me that protecting Eva doesn't mean surrendering. It means seeing through the lies and standing firm." I could almost hear her voice in the back of my mind, calm but sharp, telling me not to fold under pressure, not to let charm and sweet words erase the truth. I opened my eyes and looked around the room, and suddenly every object felt like an echo of sacrifice. The hardwood floor beneath my feet, the one I had installed myself during long weekends, hammering nails until my hands blistered. The mantelpiece where our wedding photo still stood in its silver frame, Margaret's smile frozen in time. These weren't just things. They were proof of a life built with sweat, blood, and love. And yet, in the shadow of Harold's schemes, they seemed to mock me. As if all those years of effort had led to this. Being pushed aside, treated like I didn't matter. The anger flared again, stronger now, not the wild kind that burns out quickly, but the controlled fire that steels you for battle. I pulled open the drawer beside me, the familiar squeak of its hinges echoing in the stillness. Inside lay the old checkbook and the bank ledger, my signature neat and precise on every line. I picked it up, the weight of it solid in my hand. And in that moment, one thought struck me like lightning. If I let this go, they will take it all. But if I act now, I can stop them. I set the ledger down, my heart pounding. If I sit still, they'll strip me bare. If I move, if I take control, I can keep what's mine. I muttered under my breath, the words both a warning and a vow. It wasn't just money. It was my dignity, my role as a father, my place in the story of this family. The late afternoon sun was fading now, casting long shadows across the living room. I stood and walked toward the photographs again, my eyes catching Eva's graduation picture. She was smiling so brightly, her cap tilted slightly to the side, the diploma clutched in her hands. I reached out and touched the glass, my fingers trembling. That day had been filled with hope. Hope that she would carry forward everything Margaret and I had given her. But now that same smile felt like a knife in my back. I felt the tears sting, but refused to let them fall. I swallowed hard, whispering to the photograph, "I raised you better than this, Ava. I gave you everything I had." The silence answered me, heavy and suffocating. I turned back toward the leather chair, sat down heavily, and let out a deep breath. Tomorrow I will begin. Tomorrow I would peel back the layers Harold had so carefully woven around my daughter. I would look into his businesses, his investments, and his past. Because somewhere in the cracks of his perfect smile and polished words there had to be truth. And truth was always where men like him slipped. The room around me seemed alive with memory. The scent of old wood, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the fading daylight touching the corners of the bookshelves. This home had seen Christmas mornings filled with laughter, long nights of worry when bills piled high, Margaret humming in the kitchen while Eva studied at the table. Now it stood as witness to something darker, a test of loyalty and blood. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I stood once more, walking to the window, watching the city lights flicker on as the sun sank below the horizon. People moved along the sidewalks below, couples hand in hand, children tugging at their parents' coats, the ordinary rhythm of lives unbroken by betrayal. I envied them, but envy would not save me. Action would. I turned back, my gaze settling on the drawer again, where the ledger now lay open. Its pages showed years of careful saving, small sacrifices stacking into something substantial. $450,000. And then the deed to this home, safely tucked in a folder nearby, was the symbol of everything Margaret and I had built. $700,000 worth of security. Together, they were more than just numbers. They were my life, my legacy, and they would not be stolen without a fight. Tomorrow I promised myself again. Tomorrow I will start digging. Tomorrow I would confront the storm. As I switched off the lamp and let the room fall into semi-darkness, I whispered once more, this time with steadier breath, "Margaret, guide me, because I will not let them win." I woke before dawn, the kind of gray hour when the city is quiet and the heart is loud. The choice I made last night felt solid inside my chest. I would stop drifting. I would act. I shaved, put on the navy blazer Margaret always liked on me, and took the early train into Manhattan. The cafe Harold picked sat on a corner of polished stone and tinted glass, the kind of place where the cappuccino came with a lecture about beans. Inside, everything gleamed. Brass, marble, mirrors. He rose when he saw me and smiled like we were old friends, meeting again by fate rather than design. "Mr. Rice," he said, warm as a radio host. "Thank you for meeting me. You look sharp. May I order you something?" He did not wait for my answer. He ordered for both of us, then pulled a folder from his leather bag and spread papers on the table like a dealer laying down cards. "I want to be transparent," he said. "One of my funds is under routine regulatory review. Assets are sound, liquidity is tight. The venue needs deposits today. The band, too. If I liquidate now, I take a beating. If I bridge this, we're fine." His cup rotated 90 degrees, then back, the small movement of a man pretending to be calm. He spoke of markets and timing and what Ava deserved. Then he said the number, $45,000. "I'll return it by year's end," he said. "With interest. Please don't tell her. I don't want to spoil her day." I looked down at my hands and saw a father, not a banker. I heard Margaret in my head telling me to be careful. I heard Eva's laughter from a week ago when she called to say she had found the man of her dreams. My pen felt heavy when I signed the check. My name curved across the line as if it did not want to land. Harold's smile brightened by one shade, not two. He stood, slid the check into his wallet, rested a hand on my shoulder, and said, "You won't regret this." Then he left me with a cooling cappuccino and a window full of strangers. I walked a long time after that, past glass towers and steam rising from grates. I told myself I had done the generous thing. I told myself it was only a bridge. By late afternoon, I almost believed it. The evening came and the blue light of my phone lit the living room like a small stage. Ava's face filled the screen. She was glowing. "Dad, you won't believe the dress," she said, lifting the camera to show a river of silk and a collar of pearls. She tried to cover the tag with her thumb. "Harold took me to the boutique. They brought out the champagne. He paid with his black card like it was nothing. He said a bride should never worry about money." My mouth went dry. I heard my voice say, "That sounds wonderful," but it did not sound like me. She kept talking, breathless, cheeks pink, hands fluttering. When the call ended, I stood at the window while the street lights blinked on one by one. My money had just bought me a front row seat to my own erasure. The anger that rose in me was not wild. It was cold, and it told me to move. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. I typed his full name, Harold James Kensington. The first page showed me what he wanted the world to see: a glossy site, a sharp headshot, a list of investments that sounded like an advertisement for tomorrow. I widened the search and added an address. I typed the company name he liked to say with his chin slightly raised, as if it were a title: Kensington Ventures. A state database loaded with a click. The registered address sat in a strip mall a few miles from downtown. The suite number matched a mailbox store. I stared at the screen until the words blurred and then sharpened again. A fund with a mailbox. It fit too neatly. I kept going. I looked for other filings. I found Kensington Digital Ventures Incorporated 6 months ago. Same month he told Eva he had scaled into renewables. The address again was a mailbox. I searched court records in 3 counties. I tried combinations of his middle name. I wrote everything down. The printer coughed pages onto the tray, case numbers, dockets. A complaint that looked real, though I could only see a summary. I stacked the papers and placed a sticky note at the top with today's date. My phone lay beside the computer like a sleeping dog. I picked it up and scrolled to a number I had not used in years. Catherine Davis. Attorney. The last time I called her was when Margaret got sick and I needed to update the trust. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. "Giles," she said. "How are you?" "I need help," I said. The words were hard to push out, and then they came easily. "I gave a man a check today. He's marrying my daughter. Nothing about him holds still. I need to know what I'm standing on." I told her about the cafe, the rotating cup, the folders with seals, the black card at the boutique, and the mailbox address. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. "You did the right thing calling me. What you describe is consistent with investment fraud. Not proof, but it rhymes. Tonight, add a verbal password to all your accounts. Ask your bank about the mechanics and timing for a stop payment on the check. Tomorrow, bring me whatever you printed. I'll pull the full docket. We'll look for other cases in Los Angeles and anywhere else his name appears." "I don't want to blow up Eva's life," I said. "Not unless I'm sure." "Gather and guard," she said. "That's the move. Protect your deed. Review beneficiaries and powers of attorney. Don't accuse him yet. Let the paper do the talking." We hung up. I called the bank. The hold music was cheerful in a way that made me feel older. The representative was kind. I asked to add a password to every account. I asked to require 2 forms of identification for any in-person cash withdrawal. I asked about check number 2847 for $45,000. She told me I could place a stop payment at any time, and it would post to the system within minutes. She read me a confirmation script and asked if I wanted to proceed. "Not yet," I said. "Just making sure I understand." I wrote down every detail she gave me, every code and step. Morning came like a clean sheet. I took the folder of printouts and rode the subway back to Manhattan. Catherine's office sat in a modest building near the courthouse, a space of glass walls and sensible plants. She ushered me into a conference room where the table reflected the light like still water. I spread the pages. She leaned forward, pen in hand, and read. Sometimes she nodded. Sometimes she frowned. When she was done, she pulled a legal pad toward her and wrote a short list in a neat hand. "The mailbox addresses matter," she said. "So do the incorporation dates. And look here, this summary references a complaint in Los Angeles County. I'll pull the full file. If victims exist, there are lawyers. If there are lawyers, there are documents. Also, we need to shore up your house. Go to the recorder's office today and pull a certified copy of your deed. Keep it off-site. Consider a letter to your title company requiring your physical presence for any transfer. And please review your trust and beneficiary designations." We talked about numbers. 450,000 in savings, 700,000 in home value. The check for 45. She spoke of tools, not weapons. Notice, passwords, timing. "This is about position," she said. "Get to high ground and wait." I left her office feeling taller, not younger, but steadier. I went to the recorder's office, waited for my turn, and paid the fee for a certified copy of my deed. The clerk slid it under the glass in a stiff envelope. My name sat on the paper in black ink, a promise from a younger man to the older man I had become. On my way home, I stopped at the bank branch and asked the manager to place a note on my file, requiring the password for all telephone transactions. I confirmed there was no joint access tied to Eva or anyone else. The manager printed the screen and let me see the note. "You did the right thing," he said, "the kind of kindness that has nothing to sell." On the train back to Brooklyn, I rehearsed conversations that might come. If Harold called to check the leash, if Eva asked for more help. In those imagined conversations, I kept my voice level. I reminded myself that anger often serves the other side. I looked at my reflection in the window and spoke under my breath. "They think I'm weak," I said, "but they're about to see their mistake." At home, I set the deed on the left side of the kitchen table and the bank folder on the right. The apartment felt less like a museum and more like a command post. I opened my laptop again and created a separate file for each version of his name. I tried Harold J. Kensington, Harold James Kensington, H.J. Kensington. I added the surnames Morrison and Richards just to test a hunch. Men like him change names the way they change stories. I found social posts with the same smile and different hair. I found a second LinkedIn with a different middle initial and a shorter resume. I printed screenshots and added them to the stack. Around noon, a text came from Eva. A photo from the boutique, the dress on a mannequin with the price tucked behind a strand of pearls. "He says I'm priceless," she wrote. I started typing, then stopped. I put the phone face down and placed my hand flat on the table until the urge to reply passed. Love without brakes turns into a crash. I could not be the airbag this time. I had to be the guardrail. In the afternoon, I called Catherine. She answered on the second ring again, a habit that made me trust her even more. "I have something," she said. "There is an active civil case in Los Angeles County naming a Harold James Kensington. Alleged misappropriation of funds, fraud, wire deception. The complaint references other potential victims. I've requested the certified copy. I should have a scan by morning." The quiet of my kitchen changed shape. It wasn't empty anymore, it had edges. "So it isn't just me," I said. "If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me." "It's rarely just one," she said. "Do not confront him yet. Let the paper speak, document everything. And Giles, hug your daughter with your words, not your wallet." After we hung up, I walked through the apartment like I was checking a fence line. Bedroom, hall, closet. Margaret's winter coat still hung there, soft shoulder sloping over a wooden hanger. I ran my fingers along the sleeve. "You'd spot him in a minute," I said. Her absence answered me with a silence that felt like a nod. Evening arrived. I made soup, ate half of it, and washed the bowl by hand. I opened the laptop again and arranged the documents in a single folder on my desktop. Then I reached for the yellow legal pad and wrote out the plan the way Catherine had described it, short and simple. Learn, protect, time for the strike. Under that, I added one more line in block letters. Do not second guess. The phone rang. Harold's name appeared, crisp, as if it had been polished. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message full of warmth and sunshine. He hoped the cafe meeting had reassured me. He appreciated my trust. He couldn't wait for the big day. He wanted me to know Eva was happier than he had ever seen her. The words were fine. The tone was too practiced. I deleted it and felt lighter. I slept, not well, but steadily. In the morning, I walked to the park and let the cold air clear my head. A boy practiced with a baseball mitt while his mother clapped. I remembered the small Eva, the trust in her eyes when she jumped from the porch steps because she knew I would catch her. Catching her now meant something else. It meant building a net strong enough to hold the truth. When I got home, an envelope waited under my door. Catherine's assistant had sent a messenger. Inside lay a photocopy of the Los Angeles complaint, 20 pages of clean type and measured outrage. The case number sat at the top like a label. The allegations marched down the page in simple lines. Promissory statements, false representations, transfers initiated under the promise of quick returns. 19 exhibits listed, dates that matched the pattern in my own notes. I set the document on the table and felt my hands steady. I called the bank one more time, not to act, but to confirm the steps when the time came. The representative repeated the process. I could place the stop payment at any hour. It would take effect immediately. A confirmation number would be issued. I thanked her and hung up. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed a sentence I wanted to see when everything grew loud. When the music stops, act. In the afternoon, I walked to the corner store and bought a sturdy folder with metal prongs. I labeled it with a black pen, Kensington. I slid the complaint inside, then my printouts of mailbox addresses, then my notes from the bank, then the certified copy of the deed in its sleeve. I added a sticky note on the front with 4 words. Hold your position, Giles. I slipped the folder into my old leather briefcase, the one Margaret bought me when I got my first promotion. The handle fit my hand like it remembered me. Before dusk, I made one more call, this time to the hotel where the reception was booked. I asked the events desk a simple question, as if I were a father checking etiquette. The coordinator spoke like she was reading policy. Significant deposits are required up front. Final payment is due before the event begins. If payment fails, service pauses. Bands and photographers need confirmation codes before they perform. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall. Money, then music. That was their order. I logged into my bank and turned on alerts for every account. Any withdrawal over $500 would trigger a text and an email. I placed a temporary freeze on my dormant line of credit so no one could pull against it with a forged application. Then I walked to the branch and rented a safe deposit box. The clerk handed me a key and led me into the room lined with metal doors. I slid the certified deed inside, along with a copy of my will and a list of account numbers. I felt lighter leaving than when I walked in, as if the building itself had taken a piece of my worry and locked it away. On my way out, the manager asked if there was anything else he could do. I asked him to note that no cashier's checks could be issued unless I was present and gave the password. He nodded and typed. Control, one keystroke at a time. Eva texted at dusk. A photo of the hotel lobby with a chandelier like a frozen waterfall. Isn't it gorgeous? She wrote. I typed "it is" and pressed send. Then I set the phone down and said to the room, I love you, and I hope you forgive me for what I'm going to do. Night lay over the city. I brewed tea and sat by the window. Cars moved below like slow silver fish. I thought about pride and how it can keep a man from asking for help until the help is too late. I thought about Margaret's habit of pausing before she spoke, as if she were leaving room for wisdom to enter. I decided to borrow that habit. I would pause. I would listen. Then I would choose the moment. Before bed, I read the first page of the complaint again. The plaintiff's name, her age, the sequence of dinners and promises, the words describing the day she realized the accounts were empty and the man she loved was not who he claimed to be. I whispered into the quiet, not my daughter, not this time. The anger that had burned cold in me softened into resolve. Resolve is quieter than rage, but it lasts longer. I slid the complaint back into the folder, slid the folder into the briefcase, and set the briefcase by the door like a packed bag. I walked to the mantel and touched the silver frame. Margaret's smile held steady. This is for her, I said, and for you. The clock in the hall answered with a small tick. I slept. I dreamed of doorways and locks and keys. In the morning, I woke rested. I made oatmeal and coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a pen. Under the word plan, I added one last line. They don't know I'm holding the one thing that will change everything. I woke to the soft thrum of rain against the hotel window and the sense that the day had already started without me. Today was supposed to be celebration. Instead, it felt like a courtroom with no judge, only truth waiting its turn. Catherine's email sat starred on my phone, the Los Angeles complaint attached, docket numbers bright and yellow. I drank the thin room coffee and read the first page aloud so the words would stand up. Names, transfers, dates that formed a staircase to the same door. I ran my thumb along the paper edge until it bit. The sting steadied me. Margaret used to say, truth arrives like a firm knock, never like a storm, and if you ignore the knock, you end up fixing the roof anyway. I pictured her tracing our names on the deed the day we closed on the house, smiling at the ink smudge on her finger. That house was still mine, still ours, and I intended to keep it that way, no matter how expensive the flowers across town looked today. The rehearsal dinner had been a parade of polished moments. White linen so flat it reflected candlelight, glasses that sang when lifted, waiters who moved like memory. I stood at the back, clapping, while a slideshow of my daughter's life floated on a wall. There she was in a red winter coat. There she was with a missing tooth. There she was in cap and gown, my arm around her shoulders. Harold held the microphone like it belonged in his hand. He thanked vendors, praised the hotel, and sold a future like a luxury car. He praised the view, the lighting, the taste of a wine I'd never learned to pronounce, then pivoted to brag about a surprise honeymoon he'd already booked. While he spoke, he kept his hand on Eva's shoulder the way a man holds a door he wants to close. Guests leaned forward and nodded. I smiled the kind of smile a person wears when the memory of a day at the park is stronger than the speech in front of him. On the way back to my room, I wrote a single line in my pocket notebook. Let paper speak. I slept in my blazer so I wouldn't talk myself out of being ready. In the dark, I whispered to Margaret that I would be brave in the morning. I did not expect comfort. I only asked for steadiness. Morning arrived bright and unforgiving, the kind of light that shows dust as well as diamonds. I checked out of my small hotel and walked up to the Fairmont with my briefcase, bumping my knee like a reminder. The lobby breathed chandelier air, a string quartet tuned with the patience of people who live by timing. Guests arrived in careful waves. A sign by the doors announced the ceremony in an elegant script that made our name look borrowed. My brother hugged me and whispered, "She looks beautiful," and looked past my shoulder toward the entrance. An attendant rolled out an easel and hooked a framed image in place. I saw my own face, and under it the tidy words I already knew. No entry. I felt the message land, then let it pass through me like weather. Hurt was a detour. Action was the road. 2 blocks down, behind glass that reflected a sliver of the bay, a branch bank stood open. The guard nodded me toward a desk where a woman with a neat bun wore a nameplate that read Jessica. I set my identification and notes on the surface, and spoke without hurry. "I need to place a stop payment. Check number 2847, $45,000. Payee Harold James Kensington." She typed, "Read the confirmation script," and asked me to verify the last 4 of my social. I did. She clicked once more and handed me a slip with a number. I read it twice and put it behind the old family photo in my wallet. Outside the branch, the air smelled like wet stone. I counted the crosswalk seconds like a coach. The number on the receipt felt like a code that turned something in my chest. I put the slip behind the family photo because one promise should stand with another. I chose the shade across the street and watched through the tall windows as staff placed candles and adjusted the angle of a cake that could have paid a month of mortgage when mortgages were smaller. The quartet slid into something bright. Guests flowed past the easel, some pretending not to see it, some reading it too carefully, all of them eager to be good at celebration. I did not need them to look at me. I needed one thing, the system to work exactly as designed. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother said the ceremony was beautiful and they were moving to the reception. Another text introduced itself as the quartet leader, polite and anxious at once, asking whether the final payment would clear before the first dance. I put the phone away. The manager began making small, quick laps around the room, tablet in hand, lips pressed into a neutral line. I recognized that look from old closings when money failed to arrive on time. You could almost hear patience thinning, the way a string can hum before it snaps. Harold called. "Mr. Rice," he said, breath held behind a pleasant tone, "we're having a small banking hiccup. Could you call and reassure your branch? You know how systems can be." I looked at the glass and saw my reflection like a witness. "What deposit?" I asked. "The check," he said, charm dropping half a notch. "The 45. "You told me you didn't need it," I said. Assets were strong. "It's timing," he replied, the veneer thinning. "Just oiling hinges." "They're oiled," I said, and let the silence reach the edges of the room. "No entry," I added, letting the words feel their full weight. He said it was Eva's idea that she needed a day without drama, and if I cared, I would help. I ended the call. The man in the glass still stood straight. Margaret would have liked that. Voicemail stacked from vendors with professional patience. Then Eva's name appeared. I answered because being a father is not a system you can pause. "Dad, please," she said, voice thin around the edges. "This is humiliating." "It is," I said, watching a server wheel a dessert tray back through the swinging doors. "Harold says the bank flagged the check. If you call, they'll release it." "The bank is careful," I said. "They taught me policies and how a stop payment works." "You stopped it," she whispered when my answer made it clear. "I protected my accounts," I said, and chose my next sentence like a step across ice. "And you can still protect yours." She told me he'd moved $30,000 from her savings into crypto because returns were better, and the app made her feel smart. The word smart hurt worse than the sign at the door. "Find a quiet hall," I said. "Breathe. Step outside for 2 minutes. Then call me back." She didn't. Harold called back without charm. He went from slander, then expertise. "You don't understand finance," he told me. "You're afraid of new markets." "I understand a mailbox," I said, and gave him the registered address of his company, every digit of the suite number. The silence changed temperature. He tried speed. A pending wire, a friend with a certified check, a card that would clear in 5 minutes if everyone would just relax. Across the windows, the quartet stopped mid-phrase and set their bows down. Across the street, a waiter checked his watch and then the ceiling sprinkler, as if rain might come inside. The florist pinched a leaf from a centerpiece and frowned at the space it left. I could read the worry the way a fisherman reads a sky. "Bring any check to the manager," I told him again. Put it in her hand. He said he would. He did not move. A security guard met me at the entrance and led me down a corridor lined with black and white photographs of a city determined to shine. In a small room with a glass table, the event manager stood with a tablet, neutral as a referee. Ava sat with her bouquet in her lap, makeup perfect except for the truth around her eyes. Harold paced the corner, jacket off, sleeves shoved high. "Mr. Rice," the manager said, relieved to see an adult in the room, "we need to confirm the status of a payment. Mr. Kensington's cards are declining, and the bank transfer he promised hasn't arrived. The check he presented earlier was returned as stopped. Do you have anything that could clarify our next step?" I set the stop payment receipt on the glass, then the deed to my home, then the first page of the complaint with the case number bright at the top. "I will not be responsible for further charges," I said. "I wish every honest person here well. D." Eva stared at the papers as if they were written in the rain. She put one hand over the complaint and left it there, as if warming it might change the words. I slid the stop payment receipt into the center, then the first page of the complaint with the case number clear at the top. "I placed the stop," I said. "After reviewing these." I tapped the paper. "I am also the sole owner of my home." Harold leaned over the table as if volume could lift ink. "He's bitter," he said. "Jealous?" "Old." The manager lifted his palm like a small flag. "We aren't a court," he said. "We have policies. Without verified funds, service ends. The balance is due now." He stared at the case number, then at his reflection in the glass table, as if one would explain the other. The manager returned and counted down the minutes in a calm voice that made the room smaller. When he announced service had ended, Harold's shoulders lowered, not in surrender, but because something he leaned on was gone. 10 minutes can be a lifetime. Service ended the way a tide retreats, with small decisions that add up. Lights lifted, the clink of glassware stopped. Staff boxed flowers with careful hands. Guests filed out in low voices. Harold returned without a smile. "This is on you," he said, words a rasp. "You didn't protect her. You exposed her." I kept my hands flat on the glass. "I exposed a lie," I said, and slid the complaint a finger's width closer so he had to look at it. "He called me small and bitter and dangerous, a man ruining a daughter's joy because he didn't understand modern wealth." I kept my eyes on the paper so my voice wouldn't climb. The manager stepped back in and asked us to clear the room. Something in Harold sagged, a tent without poles. He waited until Eva looked up and aimed a soft voice at her. "He wants to control you," he said. "He always has." Eva looked down at the registered address on the page, the mailbox she'd praised to friends without knowing. She stood, spoke so quietly the room leaned to hear. "Dad," she said, "please take me home." He took half a step, and security filled the doorway. We left by a side corridor so she would not have to pass the easel again. Outside, the air felt wider. On the steps, she held the bouquet like a railing while my phone continued to buzz. Harold pleaded, blamed, bargained, tried on sincerity, then anger, then reason. I let each message arrive like weather that would pass. My brother texted his room number across the street and said he had tea. We walked there slowly. In the quiet room, Eva washed her face and came back with the look she wore on the first days of school. We sat on the edge of the bed and called Catherine. Her voice on the speaker was steady and light. "Freeze what you can. Document everything. File screenshots before you sleep. Tomorrow, we will contact counsel in Los Angeles." Her certainty gave the air back to the room. By the time Ava closed her eyes, the phone had gone quiet, except for one last attempt from Harold that I saved without opening. At dawn, we flew home. Ava held my hand on takeoff and released it only when the coast drew a thin gray line beneath us. Back in Brooklyn, the apartment welcomed us with familiar light. I made eggs and coffee, and we ate without speeches. Afterward, I set the documents in a neat fan. Incorporation dates that made lies look new. Mailbox addresses. The complaints. The note I had written to myself on a yellow pad. Learn. Protect. Time for the strike. Ava read every line and finally nodded, once, as if agreeing with a doctor about a hard treatment. We spent the flight in a quiet that did not require an apology. On the cab ride, the bridge threw its long steel across the water, and the city looked honest again. At home, I showed Eva the floorboards I had laid with my own hands. We wrote down account numbers. We taped a list for the morning to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a baseball. When she finally slept on the couch, I sat in the chair Margaret used to claim and watched the light move along the wall. That afternoon, Catherine called with steadiness. The district attorney's office had seen patterns like this and was already listening. She forwarded a letter for vendors, a polite notice that I had withdrawn support and would not be responsible for obligations made by Mr. Kensington. I read it aloud in the kitchen, then sent it 3 times in the next hour with small changes for tone. Each time I hit send, the ground felt more level. The quartet leader replied with a simple line that made me swallow. "We believe you did what you had to do." The florist offered to hold the centerpieces for a week at cost in case Eva wanted them for anything private. The hotel manager sent a short, factual note and wished us well. Each message put a small brick back under our feet. Harold's final voicemail repeated the word love as if it could reset ledgers. I saved it. One day he might need to hear himself. Evening pressed its shoulder against the windows, and the city began its nightly song. I stepped onto the fire escape with tea and let the metal cool my palms. I thought about the easel and the neat words under my photo. No entry. I let the sting run its course, then named it so it would lose its trick. A public cruelty meant to ease a private theft. People who love you should never require your silence as proof. I said the sentence into the soft thrum of traffic below. I thought of the people in that ballroom who had laughed at jokes I did not find funny and decided they did not require my version. What I owed was steadiness to myself and to the girl who used to run into the ocean while I held her shoes. I said another sentence so it would become true in the air. People who love you do not spend your good name like a tip. Inside, Eva deleted the photos that no longer told the truth and put her phone face down. By morning, we were in Catherine's office again. Glass walls caught a slice of winter sun. The courthouse dome looked the color of an old penny. She had printed the full dockets and marked the sections that mattered. She slid a copy to Eva. "You are not foolish," she said. "You were targeted. We can convert shock into action." She laid the steps like stones across a stream. Notices today, affidavits tomorrow, a meeting with an investigator after that. She explained how to freeze what could still be frozen and how to write a clear statement while details were fresh. She spread folders across the table and showed us how the paperwork would move from here. Notices filed with timestamps, banks contacted through direct fraud channels, subpoenas if needed. She asked Eva to write a short statement while the details were still fresh. We paused often so the language would be plain and factual. Catherine kept saying, "Let the paper speak." She did not promise miracles. She promised to process. It was enough. When we left, the courthouse dome looked less like a decoration and more like a working part of a city. The feeling of being overlooked, treated unfairly, pushed out of your own story. It hurts, doesn't it? If you believe that everyone deserves to be recognized and to have their assets protected, comment the keyword "Justice" right now below. Now, let's see what they will do. Under the bright chandeliers of the Fairmont, the illusion cracked faster than anyone could have imagined. One moment, the music played, glasses clinked, and laughter carried across the ballroom. Next, the quartet set their bows down mid-phrase. Waiters froze with trays in their hands, and the hum of celebration dropped into silence. I watched from the side as the manager stepped forward, her face pale but composed, and announced that without verified funds, service was suspended. The words fell like stone. Guests shifted in their seats, whispers rushing across the room like wind through dry grass. Harold's smile collapsed into fragments he could not gather. He pulled Eva close, whispering fast, but she only stared at him with wide eyes. Moments later, when the florist began boxing flowers and the caterers wheeled trays back into the kitchen, the panic finally caught him. He shouted for his phone, waved it in the air, and promised wires, promised cards, promised anything. But the hotel staff had seen it all before. Policy is heavier than promises. Eva stumbled toward me, bouquet trembling in her hands. "Dad, what's happening?" she cried, her voice breaking. The easel outside with my photo had mocked me hours ago, but now the mockery turned on them. Harold grabbed the microphone and tried to joke, his words tumoring, but no one laughed. I could see sweat on his temples, see the desperation behind his eyes. Then, as if the evening needed one more final strike, 2 men in dark suits entered quietly from the side doors. They moved with the certainty of men who have papers in their pockets that end stories. The murmurs grew louder when badges flashed. FBI. I heard the words like a verdict. Wire fraud, over $2 million siphoned through fake ventures, victims stretching from Los Angeles to Miami. It was not just my daughter. He had built a life on lies and borrowed charm, and tonight the bill came due. Harold's voice cracked as he tried to deny, then to bargain, then to declare love. But the men placed his wrists in steel. Eva collapsed into a chair, mascara streaking down her cheeks, sobbing as though the very floor had betrayed her. Guests filed out with careful glances. Their joy curdled into gossip. The cake stood untouched, a monument to promises that meant nothing. For me, there was no triumphal shout, only the slow breath of relief. I had not come to destroy a wedding. I had come to protect the truth, and truth had done its work. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. In the days that followed, Brooklyn felt like both a sanctuary and a mirror. Eva returned, broken, to the same apartment where her childhood photos still lined the wall. She sat at my kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug she never sipped. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered over and over. Her apology was heavy but thin, born from collapse rather than recognition. She had lost nearly everything he touched, savings drained, investments vanished, trust turned to ash. I listened, but I did not rush to comfort. Forgiveness is not free. Trust is not a switch. I told her quietly, "The cost of blindness is high. You're paying it now." She buried her face in her hands and wept. I chose a different path. Instead of clutching every dollar, I redirected part of my assets into a community education fund. I wanted the money that once nearly enslaved me to Harold's scheme to become the very tool that freed others. I signed papers at the bank to establish the fund, and as I pressed the pen, I felt a weight fall away. I was not only defending myself, I was building something clean, something Margaret would have smiled at. My life became simpler. Mornings were eggs, black coffee, and walks to the park. Afternoons were visits to the library or volunteering at the center, speaking with young people about finance, about contracts, about protecting yourself. The act of giving turned into an act of reclaiming. My house felt lighter. Even the floors I had laid decades ago seemed to carry my steps differently, like they knew I had finally set them free from the shadow of Harold's greed. Meanwhile, Harold's world shrank into concrete and iron. Reports reached me through news articles and whispers, sentenced to years in federal prison, stripped of the suits and cars he had never truly owned. He sat in a cell while the victims' testimonies piled up. Eva visited once, she admitted, only to see the truth with her own eyes. She said his voice had no music anymore, only excuses. She came back shaken, as if she had visited a tomb. For me, I needed no confirmation. I had seen the collapse the night the music stopped. He had stolen his own future with every lie, and the steel on his wrists had only made it visible. The contrast was stark. My evenings ended on the balcony with tea, the city lights humming like an old song. His evenings ended in silence, four walls closing in. I had discovered peace in simplicity while he wrestled with emptiness. That was justice, not delivered by me, but by the truth he thought he could outrun. There were calls, of course. Ava left messages asking to meet, asking for forgiveness, and asking if I could ever let her back in. Once she stood at my door, eyes swollen, whispering, "Dad, please." I kept my voice calm. "I can wish you healing," I told her, "but my door stays closed until you learn what respect costs." She cried, but I did not open further. A father can love, but he must also teach, and sometimes the lesson is distance. Margaret would have agreed. She had always said, love without boundaries is not love at all. It is surrender. I could not surrender again. From all of this came lessons written deep into me. For parents, never let affection blind you to truth. Protecting children does not mean enabling their blindness, especially when money and love twist into poison. For children, do not let love, no matter how loud or sweet, drive you to betray the very hands that raised you. Trust should never mean turning away from your own blood. And about human nature itself, greed and deception may shine for a while, but in this modern world where paper trails live forever and truth finds its way into every system, greed always collapses under its own weight. I often sit in the park near the community center now, watching children chase pigeons, their laughter filling the air. I carry no bitterness, only a kind of gentle scar. The scar reminds me that survival is not enough. You must choose how to live. And I chose light over shadow, truth over deception. One evening, while cleaning drawers, I found Margaret's old locket tucked behind a stack of yellowed letters. Inside was our photo on the day we signed the deed to our home. I smiled and whispered to her memory, "We kept it, Maggie. We kept what mattered." The house still stood, the money was safe, and my dignity had survived the storm. I finally felt what I had longed for: release. As night settled over Brooklyn, I leaned back in my chair, listening to the quiet. My phone buzzed with a message from a local volunteer group asking if I'd consider mentoring next month. I smiled. Perhaps that was where this road led, to give wisdom shaped by pain, so others would not step into the same traps. That thought alone gave me peace. I whispered to myself, I don't need them anymore. I have myself. And so the story closed, not with noise, but with calm. The man who had tried to steal my life's work sat in prison. The daughter who betrayed me learned the bitter cost of blind trust. And I, at 65, found myself free at last, lighter than I had been in decades. Yet I knew this was not an end. It was the beginning of a quieter chapter, one where giving replaced grasping and peace replaced the sharp edge of betrayal. As I looked out the window, the city lights blinking like steady companions, I allowed myself one final thought before sleep. The truth had not only saved my assets, it had saved me. And tomorrow, perhaps, it could save someone else too. I moved into the small apartment overlooking the park, a place I bought for $220,000. The walls were freshly painted, a soft cream, the kind that gently caught the morning light, almost like it was cradling me. Each morning now begins with the smell of coffee and the sound of birds instead of the sharp edge of arguments or the heavy weight of betrayal. I sit by the window with my mug, steam curling into the air, and watch joggers pass, mothers pushing strollers, children racing each other down the path. It feels almost unreal that after everything, the lies, the courtrooms, the humiliation, I can wake up to peace so simple and so clean. I keep a journal on the kitchen table, a leather-bound book Margaret once gave me for Christmas years ago. The first page after the storm, I wrote in thick black ink, "Character is the only wealth no one can ever steal. That sentence has become my anchor. Whenever doubt tries to creep in, whenever the memory of Eva's tears or Harold's deceit comes back to haunt me, I open the book and run my hand over those words. It is a reminder that money may shift, houses may be bought and sold, but who we are at our core cannot be taken unless we hand it away ourselves. I hear news about Harold sometimes, bits and pieces pass through articles or the whispered curiosity of neighbors. He is still in prison, serving his time, stripped of the clothes and cars he flaunted. I imagine him in the same suit every day, no spotlight, no stage, no one left to charm. The empire of illusions he built crumbled the moment the truth came knocking. And Ava, my daughter, she tries to reach me. Letters arrive, the envelopes soft with her handwriting. They are apologies, confessions, promises that she has changed. Sometimes she leaves voicemails that trail off into sobs. But I do not answer. I do not write back. I cannot. Forgiveness, perhaps, is something I may one day discover in my own heart. But reconciliation, that requires trust, and trust once shattered like glass cannot be glued back into the same window. I remind myself often, I can love her, but I do not have to let her wound me again. That is the line Margaret would have drawn, and it is the one I now hold for myself. For the first time in years, I understand what a boundary means. One afternoon, while sorting mail, I found an invitation tucked among bills. A local charity in Brooklyn had reached out, asking if I would consider joining a small group that counseled seniors on financial safety. I read the letter twice. They wanted someone who understood contracts, savings, and the dangers of scams. They wanted someone who had walked through fire and could warn others of the flames. I folded the letter and smiled. I said yes. The first meeting was in a modest room at the community center. The chairs were plain metal, the coffee was weak, but the people, they were real. Men and women my age and older, some with trembling hands, others with sharp questions about wills and accounts. I spoke about my own story, not in every painful detail, but enough. I saw their eyes widen, not in pity, but in recognition. They, too, had trusted the wrong hands, too easily believed the promises of people who wore familiar faces. When I finished, one woman reached across the table, touched my arm, and said, "Thank you. You said what I never could." At that moment, I felt Margaret's presence as clearly as if she sat in the chair beside me. Life has become slower, but richer in a different way. I walk in the park each evening, the sun setting behind the trees, casting golden light on everything it touches. I see couples holding hands, young families laughing, and old men playing chess at the stone tables. I breathe it in and think, I finally found where I belong. There is no mansion, no grand fortune displayed for neighbors to envy. There is only my small apartment, the journal on my table, and the knowledge that I did not lose myself to betrayal. As for Harold, his fate remains sealed in those prison walls. The last I heard, he filed appeals that went nowhere. He may one day walk free, but he will never escape the truth that follows him like a shadow. His name is tarnished, his connection severed, his charm spent. That is the price of living on deceit. It pays richly at first, but it always leaves you bankrupt in the end. Ava still lives under the weight of his choices. Perhaps she will rebuild, perhaps she will not. But my life is no longer chained to hers in that way. She chose her path, I chose mine. And in that choice lies the heart of my lesson. For parents, I say this: love your children fiercely, but do not let that love blind you to their mistakes. Protect them, yes, but not at the cost of your own dignity. Boundaries are love, too. For children, I say, do not betray the hands that raised you for the arms of someone who only seeks your inheritance. Love that demands you cut ties with your own blood is not love. It is manipulation. And about human nature in this modern world? It is clear to me now, greed dresses itself in many clothes, but it always walks the same road, and that road ends in ruin. Truth may walk slower, but it always arrives. A few weeks ago, while organizing old boxes, I came across my father's pocket watch. The brass was worn, the glass scratched, but it ticked still, steady and faithful. I set it on my desk. Every time I hear its soft tick, I am reminded that time is the only true currency. How you spend it is the measure of your wealth. I choose to spend mine on peace, on giving, on protecting others from falling into the same traps. That watch whispers to me every day, keep going. You chose right. There are evenings when I sit with neighbors outside the cafe, sipping coffee and laughing about little things, the weather, the ball game, the quirks of city life. They don't see me as a man who was betrayed. They see me as Giles, the widower who volunteers, the man who knows about contracts, the one who likes his coffee black. And that is enough. That is freedom. Sometimes, when the park is quiet and the last light is fading, I close my eyes and whisper to Margaret, I don't need their apologies. I have myself, and I have the truth. It feels like she answers in the rustle of leaves, in the laughter of children passing by, in the peace that fills my chest. Family, I have learned, is not only the people tied to your blood. Family is the circle of those who respect you, who value your dignity, who stand by the truth even when it costs them. That is the family I have now, a family I chose, and who chose me in return. So I end this chapter not with sorrow, but with calm certainty. My daughter may continue to write letters I will never read. Harold may count days on concrete walls. But I, at 68, sit in my apartment overlooking the park, knowing that each morning I wake is proof that I survived. Proof that I chose truth, proof that I am finally free. Every day is a testimony. I chose correctly. I chose myself. And I learned at last that character, your true self, is the one inheritance no one can steal. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.